This is News Guardian. With Greg Aldridge and Chip Tarbun on WFJX Fox Radio 910.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's Monday. The sun is shining. The birds are singing. And we're here on News Guardians on Fox Radio 910 for your morning drive show.
And I woke up early, ready to get up. Felt good. Rested. Ready. Yeah, man.
I'm good for you. I can't really say that. I didn't want to get up this morning, but I had a cup of coffee.
I haven't even had coffee yet. And I was ready to be here and do this with you and all of the people out there listening right now. I could not wait to get here.
Well, there's lots to talk about. We had a fun, exciting weekend at the Republican convention in Roanoke.
I don't know how fun it was, but there was a little bit of excitement. I guess you can say that.
Well, you know, one thing I'll say for the Civic Center, they need to do a better job. Their internet connections are terrible.
No, I find it amusing, and just so you understand, Saturday at the Roanoke Civic Center was the Republican nominating convention for United States Senate. Chip was there to cover it. We were helping one of the candidates Saturday. We talked about it last week. You probably remember. If not, that's what it is. But, yeah, the internet connection. But here's what I find amusing. And tell me if there's what's wrong with this picture. Okay, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Roanoke has a $7.5 million brand new amphitheater that they bought on credit. Okay? But we can't afford a couple $1,000s to make sure that all the light bulbs inside the Civic Center that we already have are functioning properly.
Yes, because there's lots and lots of them in the upper deck that don't work.
There were these poor people up not on the floor, but up on the sides, over to stage right. In dark sections because the bulbs were burnt out in the sconces and the lights over there. And they're there trying to read their program and their printed materials, squinting, holding this thing up to their eyes, trying to see because there wasn't enough light to be able to read anything. And they kept saying, they should turn the lights on. And the problem wasn't they weren't turning the lights on. Because those lights were on all over the room. It was just bulbs were burnt. Massive numbers of bulbs were burnt out in sections all over that room.
Well, don't worry, Greg. The city can just next time they put out a bond for whatever they need money for.
They're going to get a bond for bulbs?
They got a bond.
Are you serious?
They had to replace a carpet in the Civic Center, and they had to get a bond to do that. They got to borrow money to fix the carpeting in the Civic Center.
Roanoke, when your city government has to issue a bond to replace light bulbs in the Civic Center, you just might be on your way to becoming Detroit. Think about that. It's pathetic.
Well, so it was an interesting. Conventions are always an interesting political event because you have a lot of sound and fury. So we can talk about how the Terry McAuliffe of the Republican Party became the nominee to run against Mark Warner.
We can give you kind of a final rundown of how that worked. Talk about some interesting things that happened there. I had an altercation with radio talk show host John Fredericks.
Imagine that.
Are you familiar with? You're familiar with John Fredericks?
Well, I'm familiar with him because you've had run-ins with him before in the past.
So yeah, I had a very interesting interaction with him, which we probably won't talk about today because I want to get all the material together. But if you tune in tomorrow, you will get to hear what happened with John Fredericks and I, and it's a doozy. It's worth. Actually, I'll be here tomorrow. I guess I won't get to do it tomorrow.
Maybe Wednesday.
Yeah, or Thursday or Friday, or never, maybe never. I don't know.
Well, I'm glad you teased something you're never going to do. That's stunning radio.
Well, we'll put it on the website tomorrow, regardless of whether I get to talk about it until Friday.
Wow.
And it's a doozy. I mean, it's a fascinating story of copyright infringement and spittle.
And then in the state, there's a big story.
Yeah. Do we want to hit that first before we go into what happened?
Go with that.
So I heard about this on the way in this morning. In fact, let's do a real quick rundown on how the other media is reporting things. It's being reported that Phil Puckett, who's a member of the state senate from our side of the state, is resigning. And evidently, because he's resigning, the House of Representatives are going to okay his appointment to some board.
Yeah.
And they're going to okay his daughter's appointment to a judgeship.
Mm-hmm.
So if you read the Huffington Post today, this is how they describe this. GOP straight up bribes Democrat senator in effort to block Obamacare. Now, here's the funny thing. The Huffington Post, I believe it is a worthless piece of trash. However, I'm hard-pressed to figure out how they're wrong about this being a bribe. Can you tell me how this isn't a bribe?
I don't know. It's a bribe as much as it is. I mean, he wants this, so he's willing to sacrifice his position in the state senate.
One of our listeners who actually listens to John Fredericks just sent us a message that says John Fredericks is a butthead.
Well, I know some of our listeners that like John Fredericks.
Well, maybe I'll shed some light on the John Fredericks that they don't know about.
Yeah, because I mean, I honestly, I mean, I know who he is, but we don't get him here in Roanoke, and I don't make an effort to listen to him. So I think I've heard him one time in my entire life. So he didn't make much of an impression on me. So
all right, so back to the bribe. How is this not a bribe? Now, I get that Republicans and conservatives across the state are going to be giddy with excitement over the fact that for just a brief period now, the balance of power in the Senate is shifting. The Republicans have one up on a vote, and this will help them get the budget through, and they're going to have, their legislative dreams are going to come true in the special session. Okay, I get that. But how is this not a bribe? How is it that they didn't use political favors to achieve that goal? What makes this right?
Well, maybe they're at war, Greg. You always say you should fight like you're at war, and if you're at war, you wouldn't worry about that.
You don't get to pick and choose. You don't get to be at war for a moment and then go back to playing a game, and then you're at war on Friday. No, you don't get to excuse when you choose to do things that are questionable and say, well, that's because I was at war. Because if you're at war, then there's a whole lot of other things you're supposed to be doing,
well,
too.
They're changing their stance. But, I mean, I don't know how else you explain it, because if the Democrats had done something similar, the Republicans would be screaming that this was a bribe. I mean...
And the media wouldn't.
Yeah, exactly.
The media would talk about what a savvy political move this was for Democrats in Virginia.
Exactly, because there's a double standard. Get used to it. Though, speaking of double standards... Not that this is a shock, but the Roanoke Times demonstrated their media bias over the weekend, too.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Well, I had to do with my favorite columnist / reporter.
Well, let's take our first break. It's 1:15 the hour, and when we come back, we will find out what the latest offense to sensibility
journalism.
And truth and journalism the Roanoke Times has committed. When we return to News Guardians on Fox Radio 910.
News Guardians on Fox Radio 910.
The story of bribery gets better and better. Now,
yes, you made a great point on the break. You should have...
Yeah, it just occurred to me that the headline is GOP bribes Democrat senator. But what's missing from this story is the headline that should say Democrat lawmaker accepts bribe. Because if the Republicans bribed him, well, he took a bribe. And... How is that not a problem?
Well, it's the hypocrisy in politics is palpable sometimes, and it cuts both ways. Don't get me wrong, but Democrats are really good at being hypocrites.
Oh, yeah.
I mean they have it down to a science.
And Democrats. The liberals, they have the better sounding talking points because they make everything sound like they're able to make all of the statism and socialism and hate mongering that they do sound like love and compassion for people. Listen to what Terry McAuliffe's response. This is his statement on this whole thing. I'm deeply disappointed by this news and uncertainty it creates at a time when 400,000 Virginians are waiting for access to quality health care, especially those in Southwest Virginia. Because I, as Terry McAuliffe, I care deeply.
Well, he does it
every
every
time. I care so much about people, about people having health care. There's people out there that can't go to the hospital, and it's the Republicans' fault. And as soon as I stop doing shots on MSNBC, I'm gonna go down to Montgomery County, and I'm gonna take sick people to the hospital, and I'm gonna pay for it myself. Oh God! Oh my God!
You can't do that because he's going to keep the bar stocked.
What?
I mean, come on, Terry. He's got to do shots at MSNBC. He can't do that if he's paying for everybody's health care.
But in all honesty, their nonsense sounds better to stupid people.
Well, and Terry McAuliffe always. I mean, if you ask him about what time the paper should be delivered to his house, he'll turn it into a talking point about passing Medicare expansion. I mean, I'm not saying...
Well, yes, because the paper's late, and that's just one more example of how the little guy is getting the shaft because they can't get quality health care, and it's the Republicans' fault.
Everything that happens in the world, he'll turn into... I mean, I'm not saying that's not smart, because it kind of is, but it's just also extraordinarily disingenuous. But that's the normal state of affairs.
For real. And the double standard is also the normal state of affairs, especially at the Roanoke Times. So you're going to tell us what the Roanoke Times' latest offense to journalism, truth, and...
Well, if you're sitting at home, let's just do this exercise together. See, we can work on this. This is like a multimedia experience for you. So if you're driving in a car, don't do this because you might wreck your car. So if you go to Roanoke.com, which is Roanoke Times website, and if you look across the top of the page, you'll see a number of links: news, local, sports, business, weather.
Ooh, hit news.
Yeah, so if you just hover over news.
Okay.
Just hover. Just kick your kind of hover, and it brings up crime, politics, schools, nation, world, and then there's some things on there. And there's Dan Casey.
Under news?
Under news.
Now, Dan has specifically told me on numerous occasions that he's not news. He's just a columnist.
Well, I guess the editors of the Roanoke Times have
gotten that message.
Got that message
Because that's his defense. Whenever I criticize him for the BS and lies, that's his defense. Is I'm not the news. I don't have to do that. I'm not news.
Well, and if that was the case, if he was truly just a commentator making stupid comments, which he does probably 85% of the time, that's fine. He's got every right in the world to be a commentator and make stupid comments and stuff.
But you can't have it both ways. But actually, you can't have it both ways.
Well, you can if you're the Roanoke Times, because you don't have to. So he's under news. Now, if you say, well, where else would we put it? Well, if you go over about 6, there's an opinion section. Wouldn't that make sense if he really was an opinion guy? Wouldn't it make sense?
Maybe they stuck him under there, too.
No, he's not.
No, he's under news.
Because the first time I tried to find Dan Casey's column online, I expected it to be there because he's told me the same thing. I'm not a reporter. I'm a commentator. Well, not according to your paper. So, interestingly enough, I was looking for information about the convention, sort of the coverage, because I heard that he was at one of the events Friday night. And if you go to there, there's a video linked. And the video link that you get to is called, and it says, "Welcome to Roanoke, Virginia, GOP," with exclamation points. If you were to click on that link, for some reason, for whatever reason, a Republican would go to...
We're not encouraging you to do this because your clicks on their website makes them money. So if you don't like the Roanoke Times, don't.
So I'm taking one for the team here.
Yep. So Chip will click once for all the thousands of you out there, so we don't give them 1,000 clicks on their website and make Roanoke Times even more money. So you just let Chip do it for you.
So all it has is Republican delegates. Root Boy Slim has a special tune to ensure your weekend is a memorable one. Turn up the volume. And it's a video by this artist who's been dead for like 10 years called Rich White Republican.
And that's news.
That's news.
Well,
so a video by obscure pop star, whatever he was, slewing out racial and class warfare hatred is news, according to Roanoke Times. So, again, if you have a subscription to the Roanoke Times, you're giving them money to do this.
Yeah, you are paying them to spread the propaganda and lies, and you know, they're fighting a war against you, people. They're fighting a war against you, and you have got to engage in the battle.
And it's a simple step. Just cancel your subscription.
Yep. Stop giving them money and stop giving them clicks.
Because it pains me to even mention his name on the radio, but it was too juicy just because, I mean, when I was looking for news about the convention, I came across this, and I'm like, wow, well, that's news. But not news, because I expect the Roanoke Times to be biased and scummy, and they live up to my low expectations.
Well, and we're going to give you all, you know, kind of a rundown on our observations and a little behind the scenes stuff from the convention in the second half hour of the show. But before we get to that, we've got a new story that's tied to remember the River Laker story we reported on a few months ago about how the Roanoke City was going after him for letting people stay in his house?
Yes.
Well, now in Miami, they're running stings, cop stings on people who are giving people rides. Have you heard about this, Larry? Do you know about this?
No.
So there's evidently, you know, Airbnb, which was a kind of a social media website service that, you know, people can use to find people that want to open up their homes and let people stay there when you're traveling. This is a big thing in Europe. Europeans do this kind of thing all the time. And River Laker was using that and having people come stay in his house. And you know, somebody who runs a bed and breakfast evidently trolled that thing, recognized River Laker's house, and turned him in to the city, who, you know, decided to use the force of the police to deny River Laker his full use of his private property over licensing issues. So that's with respect to accommodations. Well, the same kind of thing goes on with giving people rides, and there's a couple of different services that do that. One's called Uber and one is called Lyft, and it's the same kind of thing. It's an online social thing where people who need rides and people who can give rides connect so that you can carpool, you know, and you know, get people where they need to go. So in Miami, then this story comes from Business Insider. Cops in Miami are running a sting to catch Lyft drivers.
Lyft drivers? What are those, Greg?
Well, these are the people using the Lyft service to find people who need a ride somewhere.
Wow, how dare they, fascists.
In Miami, a city that's fought against ride-sharing services, cops are running a sting to catch Lyft drivers and tow their cars. One driver, Juan Arango, picked up an undercover cop and was pulled over shortly after. His car was then towed. Now, they're impounding these cars and charging them like $2,000 to get your car back from the cops. If you have the audacity for somebody to slip you a $5 to get a ride to work. I mean...
Yes, I'm glad to know that our freedom allows us to not share a ride with somebody. So it's got to be a black market. I mean, it's perfectly fine to do it as long as you keep it under wraps. Don't tell anybody. Don't let people know you're sharing a ride.
This is the kind of nonsense they did in fighting the war on drugs. And you know, everybody who was against drugs thought, well, this is a great idea, because it's going to make us safer. No, it's just increasing the police power, because here we are 30 years down the road from the war on drugs, and what are they using that police power for? Where have they expanded it to? To people letting somebody spend the night in their house or take a ride in their car. Wake up, everybody.
But
this has got to stop.
It's all for the greater good, Greg.
No, that's not what it's for. It's for the control of government at the behest of other people's business interests.
Yes, because it would think that it would be, for those that are so green, having people sharing rides would be a Lyft program would seem to be a good thing from an environmental standpoint.
Well, sure. If this could actually flourish and lots of people start using it, can you imagine the number of cars you'd get off the road that you wouldn't have to produce, the energy that you would save? You would think the environmentalists would be all over this because of the carbon it's going to save by having fewer cars because people are sharing rides.
Well, I think that argument is full of hot air. There's a lot of legitimate reasons you could do. For, like, last I checked, most big cities, Miami included, have traffic problems.
I agree with you.
Real problems.
I agree with you that the carbon footprint argument is ridiculous, but for people who believe that that's not ridiculous, for people who really believe that this carbon footprint thing is important and it's causing the end of the world, they should be able to see that argument being made in defense of this simple freedom that people have to choose who they give a ride to. I mean, they should get it.
The double standard is alive and well, Greg.
It's just idiocy, I tell you. And tyranny is still the order of the day.
Well, we have a second before the music cuts us off. We'll be back in a few minutes to talk about the Republican convention.
Yes, we will tell you what happened on Saturday right here in Roanoke and the Republicans nominating their candidate for U.S. Senate when we return.
This is News Guardian. News Guardian with Greg Aldridge and Chip Tarbun on WFJX Fox Radio 910.
Welcome back to the News Guardians on Fox Radio. We're getting a lot of nice, very positive and uplifting comments from the listeners today. Appreciate that. Thank you. Shout out to Stu, who's listening. Shout out to Joanne out on the coast. Thanks. Listening online. We can reach the entire world from this little room.
It's amazing.
For 1 hour every morning.
Well, I got good feedback from some folks about because I had two hats on Saturday at the convention.
I know you look like you were wearing a deer stalker because you had the brim on the bottom one backwards.
But I actually had two credentials. I had a campaign credential to work on the Tony DeTore campaign, and I had a media credential so I could be a media guy. So I had to when I went back and checked on the voting tallies, I had to put my campaign credentials on, and when I blogged about the thing, I had to use my media credentials.
Which I appreciate you doing double duty on Saturday. Leaving me free to focus on trying to get stuff done in the room for Tony. And just so people know, because we believe in full disclosure here, I mean, our mission on Saturday was to introduce somebody to the Republican Party that we feel is an amazing guy who is a stalwart fighter for liberty, understands the core liberty principles, and we believe if elected to public office, he would employ them to make all of us freer and to fix the problems that we have with common sense and freedom being the guiding principles there. So that's what we wanted to have happen Saturday, was for the main activists across the state in his party to get a good introduction to him so that they could understand, hey, this DeTore guy's great.
Yes, and that was the main goal, and I thought he did a pretty good job of doing that. In fact, a really good job. And people coming up to me afterwards talking. I had a person actually solicit me for his phone number to thank him for the things he said. And
he got a lot of solicitations. People kept coming up to him, saying, I came here to vote for so-and-so or so-and-so, but I really liked your speech. Please don't quit. We need more people like you. I'm sorry I can't vote for you because I'm already committed, but I would if it weren't for them. So he became the second choice of a lot of people, and rightly so, because he's a great guy.
Yeah, so that was kind of just from how did Ed win the convention? Because, one of the things that we had talked about, there were 5,000 delegates thereabouts that had signed up to be delegates, and only about a little over half of them showed up.
Yep.
So basically about 45% of the delegates that said they were coming to Roanoke didn't actually show. So if there's
Which is typical. That's not unusual.
Yeah, so I wasn't shocked by that. But what that meant was that almost everybody that showed up had already picked a horse.
Yeah, they were there to vote for a specific person, and there wasn't much you were going to do to change that.
Right. So last year, for example, there were a lot of people there that were just there for Ken Cuccinelli, because it was
Rob Bell or Mark Obenchain.
Right. So there was other races, and besides the disputed
Cuccinelli was decided.
Right, but there was people there for other reasons, and then there were 7 candidates. So as candidates got eliminated from the running, their supporters had to pick another horse. So there were a lot of undecided people to persuade at that convention,
or to persuade, who were decided, but to persuade, if your guy's out, who's next on your list if you're going to stick around and vote. So
so being persuasive was very important at that.
Absolutely.
If this, basically, Ed could have gotten up on stage and said, "I'm running, vote for me," and walked off the stage,
and still won that convention,
and it wouldn't have made any difference at all.
Yep, yeah, I agree. And the number 2 guy in vote getting was Shaq Hill,
and
who we didn't think was bad, but Shaq. Shaq had this awesome video of jet fighter planes and with Top Gun music talking about him being a combat pilot. It was really inspirational.
In a touching video with his family, and he hit all the right notes to his supporters.
And in a room where you might have had a large number of people wanting to hear the speeches and hear from the candidates and then decide, that might have made a difference. E.W. Jackson even came out on stage and endorsed him from the stage and introduced him. In a room where you had undecided people, that might have made a difference. But on Saturday, 99% of the people, from my observation, they showed up to vote for one or the other, and you weren't dissuading them. They were firmly committed.
Yes. So if you looked around the room, everybody either had an Ed sign or Shaq sign, and that was it. So bringing E.W. Jackson on stage, as much as I love E.W., doesn't do you any good.
I don't know how it helps in that situation.
You're preaching to it got all of his supporters really fired up and excited. But if you were an E.W. Jackson supporter and you showed up to the 2013 convention, then showed up to the 2014 convention, I'm almost guaranteed 99.9% of those people are voting for Shaq. Anyway, so who are you convincing by bringing E.W. up there? And if anything, it probably, between E.W. Jackson, who's kind of a polarizing figure. People in the Republican Party either really like him or really don't like him. And if you got there and you're an Ed supporter, you're probably there because you want to win, and you bring up the candidate who lost.
No, you're there because you've been led to believe that the only way you can win is if Ed Gillespie is the nominee.
And E.W. Jackson reminds you of why they picked him. Because he's got money and he can do it, and people like E.W. can't win.
The interesting thing there,
in their mind,
right? Well, the interesting thing there is that Ed Gillespie was part of the architect of not supporting E.W. Jackson last year during the very guy they were depending on to be the only way we can win this year is the guy that helped us lose last year on purpose because he didn't like E.W. Jackson. So
then he attacked Ed obliquely. But he did attack him. And of course, everybody, there was a lot of boos when he did that, and a lot of cheers, because everybody already made up their mind. So,
right.
You could say, well, he shouldn't have criticized him. It wouldn't have mattered. It didn't matter what he said.
Nothing anybody did at Saturday.
It was already decided when they opened the convention, and whoever was there, it already was picked. It was done no matter what they did, what they said, how pretty the presentations were. It was all done.
Now, there were some interesting irregularities. For example, when it was time to get the thing started, and get the candidates up there speaking so that we could get on to the vote, you look around the room, and there was a big giant section that was mostly empty. And you could look in the program, and you could see it was Fairfax. So at one point, it's starting to run behind. We're like almost an hour behind schedule, and they keep having these people come up on stage that may have been originally part of the program to say just read a report or something, say something short, that talked for a long time. It felt like they were dragging this thing, and I kept asking, why is this not going? What in the world are we doing? Oh, we've got to do this, we got to do that. Well, somebody told me at one point they'll start the convention now because the Fairfax buses just got here. So I looked in the program, and that empty section was the Fairfax section.
And they voted overwhelmingly for it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so, take that for what it's worth, but that's one of the little games that gets played when you are in control, essentially, of the mechanism that makes things happen. Then you can do things like hold the convention up until all your supporters are there, till you get everybody into the room. So I would suggest that if you want to prevent that particular game playing, then have a hard-pressed time that it's going to start. Publish the time, put it in the rules, and it's starting then, so that the people in control don't have the ability to manipulate things while they get on the phone and call more of their supporters into the room because they're afraid they're going to lose.
That's standard operating procedure.
I know it is, and it's not right. It's just not right. I noticed that this year they had the lights off during the convention. Like while people were speaking, the room was dimly lit. And it always is, except for last year when the room was conspicuously lit up like daytime. That's only important because, of course, we had that beautiful candle ceremony thing planned for EW's speech. And so this is why controlling the mechanism is important, because we didn't get to have our, candle-lit moment and to generate that emotion during EW's speech last year, because they found out what we were going to do and turned all the lights on. I mean, it's a silly little piddly stuff, but things are right or wrong, and it's wrong to abuse your power and authority in a situation like this for the benefit of what you want the intended outcome to be.
Now, it was interesting because, if you were to look at the crowd, if you looked at the crowd and just looked around, it looked like it was about evenly split between Shaq Hill and Ed Gillespie people. In fact, it really looked at some points that there was maybe more Shaq people there than Ed people. When they went to vote, it was very much in question what was going to happen, but when the ballots were cast, it was pretty I went back and looked at I put my campaign hat on and went back and observed the counting process, and it appeared to be very much done on the up and up, and I don't think anybody cheated anybody out of the system in any kind of meaningful way. So.
I observed too. I saw people having problems.
Yeah.
I watched some counting where they were counting like a second and third time because they kept screwing up.
We actually helped. I won't say what delegation it was, but we actually hurt our own candidate because they were going to mess up and give Tony extra votes.
Yeah, it was like 23 votes, and they'd stuck it under Tony DeTore instead of Shaq Hill.
Yeah.
And I got all excited for a second until I looked at the stack.
It was 32, actually.
32. Yeah. And I looked at the stack he was counting, and they had Shaq Hill checked, and I was like, oh, those aren't our votes. I was like, oh, man. It's like, dude, you need to put Shaq Hill's name there. And he looked down, he looked over, and he scribbled everything out and started all over again.
Clunked himself in the head. I mean, it could happen. I mean, it was an honest mistake. It was obviously not done intentionally.
Yeah, he wasn't trying to cheat for Tony.
Yeah,
he just was making a clerical error.
Yeah, so obvious. I mean, I had no doubt that the process was a little low tech, but they did a good job of putting that together. So all in all, I mean, you got what you got. Moving forward, Ed got what Ed wanted. Now, if you go out, they're already calling him Pocket Ed, because he's bought and sold by corporate interest. I just find, and it's not that that's not true, because it kind of is. It's just your governor you just elected is the ultimate example of Pocket Terry.
The very people who think it's perfectly acceptable to have a sleazy fundraiser who uses questionable means to raise money for questionable political purposes, Terry McAuliffe, the very same people that think that's okay are now going to rail on Ed Gillespie because he's a fundraiser.
I mean, I don't like Ed Gillespie, but I mean, it's the hypocrisy of that. I mean, I saw that first ad, and it made me audibly chuckle.
Well, you know what it is? It's the double standard. Get used to it, because it's not going away. But we are. We'll be right back after this break.
News Guardians on Fox Radio 910.
910.
Fox Radio.
Before we get into our last story, I want to give another shout out and a thank you to Brambleton Frame Shop for the amazing work they did on that picture that's hanging in our office. If you're not familiar with them, it's Southwest Roanoke's best kept secret. Evidently, but they're right there on Bramilton, across from Luigi's, right down from Bramilton Imports that used to be the car wash, in the little brick building there, and they do amazing work. The gentleman that owns that does the work himself, and he does great work. He's fast. Now, if you need stuff framed and matted and colors and stuff like that, he has a great eye for color choosing and matting and making pictures look, fantastic. So give him a try. It's Bramilton Frame Shop, and they're right there on Bramilton Road across from Luigi's.
Go now because the secret is out.
The secret's out. Now, if you want to check them out on the web, it's BramiltonFrameShop.com. BramiltonFrameShop.com.
Wow, you pulled out the nice radio advertising voice.
Oh, I've got an even better one than that. The 50s were awesome for broadcasters' voices. I mean, you remember the old guys that talk like this? That was the golden age of radio, man.
Well, I'm a little young for that.
All right, so.
I mean, I'm not that old, Greg.
It's fun. I'll always be the younger one.
That's the way it'll always be. You'll never catch me.
All right, Dad, what's next?
Well, Sonny, we're going to talk about illegal immigration. So, there's a story on the Drudge Report today that's linked there from the CBS Houston affiliate about hundreds of illegal immigrants, minors, sleeping on plastic boards, rotating through 4 showers at shelter. There's been a surge from not just from Mexico, but from Central American countries like El Salvador and Guatemala of children coming to the United States trying to take advantage of what they perceive is going to be the DREAM Act, which is going to drop, which is going to allow them to become citizens. And what I found interesting about the story was an actual U.S. district judge weighing in on this. And the quote he had was quite interesting. According to this article, U.S. District Judge Andrew Hainan of Brownsville, Texas, in December, blasted authorities for releasing a Salvadoran girl to her mother who hired a smuggler to transport her daughter and was in the country illegally. This is the quote: "The government has simply chosen not to enforce the United States border security laws." That was in a written decision from the judge.
That's interesting because that's something I've been saying for a decade. Is that the problem isn't we can't police the border. The problem isn't that the resources aren't available, that the technology isn't there, that we just can't do it. The problem has been, in my entire lifetime, not just an unwillingness to protect the border, but a downright willingness to stop the protection of our southern border.
Just ask Arizona.
Yes. I mean, and if you question this at all, then why, if they're really worried about policing the border, if there's not a concerted effort to prevent the policing of the border, then why, when a border state decides to take that initiative to protect their border, which is along that border, why then does the federal government sue to stop them from protecting the border? Now, I'm going to pose a theory, which is great for the last segment.
Do you have
no, because this is not a conspiracy theory. This is just written into the UN. You mean you can go read this stuff, but the UN has as one of their UN policies on world populations, have divided the world up into these geographic regional areas and have decided, what resources are in each one of these areas and how many people are in each one of these areas, and they figured out where you need to move people from and move them into, so that the resources that are necessary for people to live are allocated evenly with the populations that they have. And what they've discovered in their anointed UN research is that North America has an inordinate amount of resources and a lower population than is what is warranted for the amount of resources we have. But South America, including the Mexican Peninsula, has higher populations with a lower number of resources. So the smart people, the ones that go to the Council on Foreign Relations and
Bilderberg meeting
and all that, they have decided because of this United Nations idea that we need to move populations out of South America and the Mexican Peninsula into North America, into the United States, basically, to balance the populations with the resources. So I'm not saying that the UN has control over what we do. What I'm saying is that people that we have put in elected power in the United States and have been appointed to positions within our bureaucracy here in America, many of those people agree with the United Nations research on that. They agree with this plan that the United Nations has. And so when we have put them in positions of power, they have used those positions of power to get that policy implemented. Now, don't take my word for it. Just study the policing of the southern border over the last 30 years, and you tell me, did we really try all that hard, or are we just letting them? Are we just letting them come across? In fact, it's even worse than that. We're not just letting a stream of people come across our border illegally. We are inviting them to. They are running advertisements all throughout the Mexican Peninsula and South America telling people to come to the United States. Just come on in. Because, or if you can't come, send your children. And I'm not kidding. They print little coloring books and comic books with instructions on how to safely sneak across the southern border of the United States.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, it's this mass media in the Central and South American countries where this is happening. It's not just a pamphlet here or there. I mean, this is something this is like a big suggestion that you should send your kids here, all because, well, you know, it's a combination not only of the decades of, you know, completely ignoring border security, willfully ignoring the law, but as you said, there's now an invite. Now's the time to come, because and Republicans bear some responsibility for this too, because they keep talking about how there's an amnesty fix in the works. In between the Democrats and the Republicans kind of whispering about this, they've encouraged this to happen. They bear the responsibility for this nonsense happening.
Well, and if you're expecting that the newly nominated Republican for U.S. Senate is going to be anything but a willing participant in that nonsense, then you've got another thing coming. And rather than get angry at me for saying it, why don't you just wait and see? Because I'm going to make a prediction. In fact, I'm not going to tell you what that is today. When I'm back later in the week, I'm going to give you Greg's list of predictions of what will happen if Ed Gillespie is elected to the United States Senate.
Well, I doubt you'll ever get a chance to see that happen.
Well, of course, Mark Warner doesn't want to let that happen.
I mean, you know, you could make the argument that Ed would be better than Mark, but
sure, Ed will not be as crummy as Mark is. I grant you that. What I'm saying is that what you believe is going to happen with Ed is not what's really going to happen, unless you agree with that. Oh, we got to go.